All right, so we back out here again, and I'm gonna be talking today on kind of a follow up to the mental health series of videos that I've been talking about the struggles with uh, how do you deal with and how do you process um, working through someone else's mental health struggles, because that is a struggle in and of itself. What makes this one interesting is, as you'll be able to see from the title, I actually had a conversation with my mom about me expressing my thoughts on the situation. And it was pretty telling, to be honest. It was actually really telling. So, to give you a short recap of that discussion, she basically shared with me that it was hard for her to hear what I had to say, not necessarily because of my perspective and my struggle, but because it was her hearing her struggle kind of being put out there. And she was worried about what people would think, and she felt like it was a negative thing, that it was becoming something more known, that because more people have an awareness of what's going on, that it's going to make life harder and people are going to be more judgmental. All of those kinds of emotions and things. We all have our insecurities when it comes to things. There are things that, if it came up in a conversation, I might be uncomfortable with, or that I would prefer not to be shared. And this was that thing for her. But I think what made it the most telling for me was, we're talking about sharing this, and the immediate context is within the Christian experience, right? The Adventist worldview and those communities that we may be closest to. Because the assumption is made that the majority of the people that hear this are going to be people that we know. So they're going to get exposed to it, they're going to hear it, and they may look at me in the way that I struggle to deal with it in a certain way. They may look at her in the way that she struggles to deal with it in a certain way. And while some of that perception may be true, one of the things that I had to reassure her was that the response was overwhelmingly positive. That people were, because people had the opportunity to expand their awareness of what was going on, they were able to have more sympathy and empathy for what was going on, for their perception of what's going on. It's interesting to see something like what we have seen and what we've been through from the outside, and to just develop your thoughts, your opinions, your judgments on that. But it's different when you get to hear from the people going through it, what their experience is like, and how they're dealing with that. Now you get that increased awareness. You get that, I don't even know the word I'm looking for right now. I don't feel like I'm quite getting it. But when you have that more open perspective on what's going on from the shoes of the people who are actually going through it, there is an opening for more sympathy, empathy, and just that common ground to a degree. Like, oh, okay, there's the potential, at least, for better understanding. One of the things that I believe and that I have told my mom on several occasions is, like, because of the experience that you're going through, you have the opportunity to be a positive light to so many people who are struggling with it, with mental health issues, and who are unwilling to talk about it, who are unwilling to share about it, because of the stigma that's out there, because of the judgment that they feel comes their way, because of the shame that comes from the context that we live in. And this is something that I can tell is hard for her to believe. And it's not her fault. That's something I had to express to her as well. For a lot of us, we have ideas and thoughts on different things that didn't originate with us. We were taught certain things growing up. There were impressions that we picked up on and that we adopted, and we started responding the same way that as we saw other people responding to these same things that we looked up to. And over time, we might not even recognize or be completely aware of why we respond to things the way that we do. But within the Christian context, mental health is one of the big ones that's looked at in a negative way. So the context that she grew up in and the context that she was exposed to taught her a certain thing, either consciously or subconsciously, about how we view people who have mental struggles. So it makes it an even bigger fight, an even bigger challenge, something even more difficult to wrestle with when you start to see signs that you may have the same struggles. I talked about this before and I appreciate Christianity and I appreciate Adventism, but one thing that I hate about the church is kind of how this negative stigma of mental health isolates people. I hate that. If there's room for everyone, and if we're supposed to be the hospital for those who need help, why do we come down on and look in such a negative light on people who have a struggle that's different than ours? Because we're all sinners. We all have a different struggle. And yet there's supposed to be room in that house for all of us, right? Even the struggles that we don't understand because we either can't or because we're not the ones going through those struggles. There's supposed to be room in this house for everyone. That's what makes the good news good news. But we have this problem and this stigma against mental health and the people who struggle with it, that it's not just a physiological or a biological issue, it's a spiritual one. So I don't think people realize this, but when we identify certain issues as only spiritual, we are taking any kind of control, we're taking any kind of positive influence, we're taking any kind of little steps that anyone can make in a better direction. We're taking all of that out of that person's hands. Now they're completely at the mercy of something that they feel absolutely powerless to. And every instance where the issue creeps up becomes another indicator to them, not that they need to find help in a natural way or go to talk to a doctor or something like that, but it becomes an indicator that they're failing spiritually. That idea hasn't come from the outside. That's an idea that we as Christians have come up with. And so we alienate those within the group who go through those struggles because of this idea that we've put out there that if you're dealing with certain issues, you're not that good of a Christian. God doesn't love you as much. You're a worse sinner than the next person. And again, the same thing applies on this end. I can't blame people for simply having that perspective because a lot of us were taught that and picked up on it. It's not something that we came to a conclusion on by ourselves. But the question is, are we aware of it? And if we are aware, how do we change it? I keep talking about how I'm going to make an episode or a series of episodes on things I don't like about the church. That's coming. But one of them is how we have this idea like we're supposed to be perfect. And because we're supposed to be perfect, we tend to look down on all the people who are not. And I think the most interesting thing about that is the perfection that we are trying to be is not God's perfection. It's not a biblical perfection. It's our own idea of perfection. And when people don't meet our own estimation of that perfection, we have an issue with them. So I might be able to get away with the little white lies that I tell, but because that person stole something from someone else, because their lie resulted in a bigger issue, cheating or infidelity or something like that, because that person killed somebody, whatever it might be, we have this hierarchy of sin as if the ones that I do are never going to be as bad as the next person. We all do it. We all do it. And then we give ourselves a pass to not reach out to those people as if they deserve the good news as well. When I look at Christ, and the Steps of Christ series is coming back. I have read a lot more than I've done videos on, and there's a lot of great stuff that I want to do videos on. So that's coming eventually. But when I look at the life of Christ, the rap on Christ was that he hung out with all the sinners. Oh, look at that dude. He hangs out with the tax collectors and all those imperfect people. Huh? How do we get to where we are today when Jesus did something completely opposite than what we do? What is it that people say about us? That we're the best churchgoers, that we're always in the synagogue every week, that we always are hanging out with the best people and all the ones who do the things that we do and like the things that we like and look the way that we look? Because that's not what they said about Jesus. They couldn't understand why he did the things he did because the ones he hung out with the most were the ones who looked nothing like him. And eventually, because he hung out with them so much, he did become to be identified with them. He who was without sin became sin for us. That's an incredible thing that I think we miss. A part of the call that we're ignoring in our quest to be better individuals and to advance the truth. We forget what's at the core of that truth. And it's that simple, yeah, I can be the perfect and holy Son of God, and my best friends can still be all the lowlifes of society. And what can he do with his divine arm but lift those people up to his level? Why else do you think the Pharisees hated Christ and his disciples so much? Because they saw someone they recognized as having great skill, talent, ability, respect, influence. And they're the ones who wanted to be with him and to take advantage of that. Why do you think they were around him spying all the time? And yet, Christ was impartial with that influence. He wasn't afraid to go and interact with the leper, to let the leper know, hey, I have good news for you. Regardless of what you're struggling with and regardless of how people outcast you from our society, there's a place for you. And I'm not going to just tell you that. I'm going to come to your place to prove it to you. How did Jesus interact with the demon-possessed person? Not that this person, because they were dealing with this issue, they were too bad to be a part of his friend circle. No, he looked at them as someone who needed good news. And as a result, that person, freed from their struggle, was able to share the good news of what Christ had done for them to their own people. Where's the good news in our message today? When we live out the example that we feel we should be living, is it good news to the people around us? Are we living that out in the way that Jesus did? Not in the way that we think we should, but in the way that he did. I see a lot of differences in the way that Jesus operated and the way that we operated today. It's humbling and it's scary. And it means I have to step my game up. But when I think about even my own initial responses to my mom's struggle, to where I've come to think about it now, don't you think that she needs some good news too? Despite the struggle, in the midst of the struggle, don't you think she needs some good news? How many more? How many more need that good news that we're attuned to and keeping to ourselves because we're putting the wrong priority first? I don't know. I'm not saying all this because I have the answers, but I do have a question, and I am searching for something. And I know that this good news might have a better answer for me than what we see in the mainstream. So that's where I'm going to keep looking. So I'm going to leave this one there. There's more to come, more thoughts, many more things I'm trying to process through and just find a way to express. So if you have whatever your thoughts are on this, let me know what you think. If you're watching this on YouTube, comment. I would love to get into a conversation and dialogue with people about their thoughts on anything that we talked about in this video. And you can do the same thing if you're listening to it on the podcast version. I think a lot more conversation needs to be had here. So I'm here and I'm putting this stuff out there because I want to be able to have a conversation on this and have some productive dialogue on this topic. I think there's a lot of good we can do. And I think that there's a way that we can make good news actually good for a lot of people, especially those who are struggling, those who are hurting, and those who have this false perception that they've been taught, that they've learned over time, that there isn't a place for them in the church and in the Christian family if they have problems. So, hope to hear from you all, and I'll see you in the next one. We out.